My dad said it was too risky when I asked for $65,000 to start my tech company. But he had no issue taking a $625,000 loan to fund Joseph's BMW and his failed ventures. Now he expects me to sell my home to bail them out. I refused and told them to leave my doorstep. I'm 34 now, and for most of my life, I believed that hard work and persistence would eventually earn me my family's respect and support. I was wrong. Completely wrong. But that mistake pushed me to build something far beyond what they ever imagined. So when they came back asking for help, I had just 4 words: get off my property. This story begins with 2 brothers and parents who somehow believed love was limited, something that could only be given to one child at a time. I'm the older brother by 3 years. Joseph is 31. From the moment he could walk, he became the center of our family's world. Not because he was gifted, but because he had a way of turning everything toward himself, often playing the victim when things didn't go his way. Growing up, I was the responsible one, always finishing homework, keeping my room clean, and completing chores without being asked. Joseph, on the other hand, was the charmer. One smile from him, and everyone forgot the trouble he'd caused or the test he'd failed. Our parents, Robert and Linda, ran a mid-sized accounting firm. They weren't rich, but they lived comfortably. Their favoritism wasn't subtle. When I was 12, my computer science teacher recommended a $600 summer coding camp, but my dad said it was too expensive. Yet, when 11-year-old Joseph wanted horseback riding lessons costing $150 per session, they managed to pay for a full semester, including all the gear and boots. At 16, I asked to take advanced computer science classes that cost $800 per year. Again, too expensive. But when 15-year-old Joseph wanted to join a travel baseball team that cost $8,000 a season, they paid for it, and even bought him a $1,200 bat. "Finn, you're already great with computers," my mom said with that patient smile I'd grown to hate. "You don't really need extra classes." But Joseph's coach says he has real potential. This could lead to scholarships, maybe even a professional career. Joseph's real potential lasted 1 season before he quit after being benched for missing practices. Total cost, over $12,000. My computer science course? Still too expensive. When I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA and a partial scholarship to State University, my family celebrated with a quick dinner at Olive Garden. Within 30 minutes, the conversation shifted to Joseph's transition struggles, which mostly meant skipping classes and getting caught smoking behind the gym. My parents immediately jumped into action, hiring an $80 per hour tutor 3 times a week, reducing his chores, and considering private school if his grades didn't improve. My uncle asked, "What about Finn? How are you planning for his college funding?" The silence said everything. Finally, my mom replied, "Finn's so independent. He already has a scholarship and a part-time job. He'll be fine." And that was that. My graduation dinner turned into a strategy meeting for Joseph's academic recovery plan. That day, I realized being responsible just meant being taken for granted. But it also taught me something. If I wanted success or security, I'd have to build them myself. And I did. I worked 25 hours a week at the campus IT help desk, took out student loans, and paid my way through college. Meanwhile, Joseph got full financial support from our parents: tuition, room and board, meal plan, and a brand new Jeep Wrangler for his 18th birthday. Their excuse was always the same. Finn, you've always figured things out on your own. Joseph just needs more guidance. What they really meant was that I was easy to ignore, and Joseph was exhausting to manage. So they took the easy route. The Jeep was the final straw. I was driving a 1998 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles and no working AC. I'd saved $3,000 to buy a used car that wouldn't break down on my commute. My father told me to keep driving the Honda until it died. 2 weeks later, Joseph pulled up in a bright red Jeep Wrangler with lifted suspension and a premium sound system. My mom was in tears, saying how proud she was to give him a reliable vehicle. When I asked how they could afford a $35,000 car after telling me to stick with my old one, she replied, "Your Honda still runs, doesn't it?" That's when I realized I'd never be their priority. Not at 12 when I wanted to code, not at 16 when I wanted advanced classes, not even when I graduated with honors. After college, I got a job at a small software firm in Austin called TechFlow Solutions. It paid $52,000 a year, solid for an entry-level role, and I was good at it. Within 6 months, I was debugging problems that stumped senior developers. In 2 years, I was leading projects. By year 4, I was managing a 12-person team and earning $85,000 annually. I studied the business side of tech, staying late for sales calls, reading everything from TechCrunch to Harvard Business Review, and attending entrepreneur meetups. I wasn't just learning how to build software, I was learning how to build software companies. Meanwhile, Joseph dropped out after 3 years and 6 majors: business, communications, marketing, sports management, psychology, general studies, then nothing. He moved back home, worked part-time at a car dealership, and cycled through big ideas: luxury car rentals, cryptocurrency mining, social media influencer, day trading, real estate flipping, then back to car rentals with a chauffeur twist. Each time, he'd make flashy presentations with charts and articles from Entrepreneur magazine. And every time my parents listened like he was pitching the next Amazon. When he got into crypto, my dad helped him build a rig. When he tried day trading, my mom opened a joint account. When he explored real estate, they toured properties with him. None of it went anywhere. The mining rig produced nothing. The trading lost $8,000. The real estate project never got off the ground. Yet every failure was called a learning experience, while my achievements were just expected. By 28, I'd saved $35,000 and spotted a market gap I could fill. At TechFlow, I noticed that construction companies struggled most with project management software. Their work involved endless moving parts, subcontractors, shifting deadlines, materials, weather delays, permits, inspections, and changing budgets. Most available tools were either too basic or overly complex. I spent nights and weekends building a prototype for a specialized project management platform aimed at mid-sized construction firms. Too large for general tools, but too small for enterprise software. After talking with dozens of contractors, the feedback was clear. They needed something simple yet powerful. One of them, Bill, said, "We need software that can manage our jobs, teams, and materials without hiring a tech guy." I built exactly that, an intuitive system designed for construction workflows. I validated it with 15 companies. 12 said they'd pay for the full version. I had letters of intent worth over $180,000 in potential first-year revenue. I needed capital for development, legal setup, trademarks, marketing, office space, and enough to live on during launch. My calculations showed I needed $65,000. I had more than half saved, so I needed around $30,000 more. Bank loans were nearly impossible without collateral. Investors meant giving up equity. So I decided to ask my family. I wasn't asking for charity. I had a business plan, market data, financial projections, and customer interest. It was a real investment opportunity. I spent 3 weeks preparing, printing the plan professionally, designing slides, reviewing numbers with my uncle in finance. I scheduled dinner at my parents' house that March. Joseph was there playing video games while I helped Mom set the table. I brought wine and flowers, hoping to keep things positive. During dinner, I began my presentation, explaining the market gap, showing the prototype, and sharing the letters of intent. "I've been working on this for a year," I said, handing over my printed business plan. There's a real need in the construction industry for specialized project management software. When I finished explaining, I showed them the financial breakdown and my estimated startup costs. "I've already saved $35,000, I said. "I just need about $30,000 more to launch properly." My father leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. My mother nodded politely, but didn't say much. Joseph looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. My dad finally spoke. "Finn, that's a lot of money. Startups are risky. Most fail within a year. Maybe you should keep saving or look for investors instead of risking family finances." I expected hesitation, but not total rejection. "I'm not asking for a gift," I said calmly. "You'd get equity and a clear return if things go as projected. The product already has interest from customers." He sighed. "Son, we just can't justify that kind of investment right now." I swallowed my disappointment, nodded, and wrapped up the discussion. Joseph soon shifted the conversation to one of his new business ideas, importing luxury watches. My parents listened eagerly. I quietly packed my laptop and left that night with a heavy heart. Over the next 2 years, I kept working and saving, moving slowly but steadily toward my goal. I finally launched the company with $58,000 of my own money and a small personal loan. It was tough at first, long hours, endless coding, and no guarantee of success. But within 18 months, our first version was profitable. Word spread quickly in the construction community. Clients loved how user-friendly the platform was. Within 3 years, my company had over 200 clients and annual revenue of $2.4 million. We expanded our team, opened offices in 2 cities, and secured partnerships with major industry players. For the first time in my life, I felt real validation. I'd built something from the ground up, without help, without handouts, and without my parents' approval. Meanwhile, Joseph's ventures followed the same pattern. His car rental company failed within a year. Then came the crypto crash, the influencer phase, and a short-lived podcast about success mindset. My parents continued supporting him financially, paying off his debts, covering rent, and even co-signing a $625,000 loan for a luxury import business that never took off. That loan was the turning point. 6 months later, the business collapsed. The dealership he partnered with sued him, and the bank came after my parents, who had guaranteed the loan. They were drowning in debt, facing foreclosure, and desperate for help. That's when I got the call. "Finn, "Can we come over?" my mother asked. Her voice trembled in a way I'd never heard before. When they arrived, they looked exhausted. My father's tone was uncharacteristically humble. "We need your help," he said. "The bank's after us. We might lose the house." He hesitated before continuing. "If you could sell your place and lend us part of the proceeds, we could pay off the worst of the debt." I stared at them in disbelief. "You want me to sell my home to fix a mess you created for Joseph?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Finn, we're out of options. You're doing so well. You can rebuild." Something in me hardened. For years, I had begged for their belief, their support, or even acknowledgement. Instead, they had poured everything into Joseph's endless failures, and now they wanted to pull me into the same hole. I stood up and opened the front door. "Get off my property," I said. There was silence. My father looked shocked. My mother whispered something I couldn't make out. They left without another word. That was 2 years ago. They eventually sold their house and downsized. Joseph moved back in with them, still chasing his next big idea. As for me, I kept building. My company recently hit $10 million in annual revenue, and we're negotiating a partnership with a national construction firm. I've built a life I'm proud of, secure, stable, and entirely my own. Something in me hardened. For years, I had begged for their belief, their support, or even acknowledgement. Instead, they had poured everything into Joseph's endless failures, and now they wanted to pull me into the same hole. I stood up and opened the front door. "Get off my property," I said. There was silence. My father looked shocked. My mother whispered something I couldn't make out. They left without another word. That was 2 years ago. They eventually sold their house and downsized. Joseph moved back in with them, still chasing his next big idea. As for me, I kept building. My company recently hit $10 million in annual revenue, and we're negotiating a partnership with a national construction firm. I've built a life I'm proud of, secure, stable, and entirely my own. Looking back, I don't regret how it turned out. I once thought success meant earning their approval. Now I know it means building something no one can take from you. My dad said it was too risky. When I asked for $65,000 to start my tech company, he refused. Then later took a $625,000 loan for Joseph's BMW and his failed ventures. Now, he wants me to sell my home to save them. I kicked them off my doorstep. I'm 34 now, and for most of my life, I believed hard work and persistence would earn me the respect and support I'd always wanted from my family. I was wrong. Completely wrong. But that mistake drove me to build something they could never have imagined. And when they came back asking for help, I had only 4 words: "Get off my property." This story starts with 2 brothers and parents who somehow believed that love was a limited resource, something that could only be given to one child at a time. My dad said it was too expensive, but when 11-year-old Joseph wanted horseback riding lessons, $150 per session, they somehow afforded a full semester, complete with gear and boots. At 16, I wanted to take advanced computer science classes that cost $800 a year. Again, too expensive. But when 15-year-old Joseph wanted to join an elite baseball team that cost $8,000 a season, they found the money and even bought him a $1,200 bat. "Finn, you're already great with computers," my mom said, with that patient smile I'd come to hate. "You don't need extra classes." But Joseph's coach says he has real potential. This could lead to scholarships, maybe even a professional career. Joseph's real potential lasted exactly 1 season before he quit after being benched for missing practices. Total cost, over $12,000. My computer science class? Still too expensive. When I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA and a partial scholarship to State University, my celebration dinner at Olive Garden lasted half an hour before the conversation turned to Joseph's transition issues, which mostly meant skipping classes and getting caught smoking behind the gym. My parents immediately made plans to help him: an $80 an hour tutor, fewer chores, and maybe even private school if his grades didn't improve. My uncle asked, "What about Finn? What's the plan for his college funding?" The silence said everything. Then my mom smiled and said, "Finn's so independent. He already has a scholarship and a job. He'll be fine." That was that. My graduation dinner became a rescue meeting for Joseph's academic troubles. That day, I realized being responsible meant being taken for granted. But it also taught me something. If I wanted success or respect, I'd have to earn it on my own. So I did. I worked 25 hours a week at the campus IT help desk, took out loans, and put myself through college. Meanwhile, Joseph got a full ride from our parents: tuition, room, board, a meal plan, and a brand new Jeep Wrangler for his 18th birthday. Their excuse? "Finn, you've always figured things out on your own. Joseph just needs more guidance." What they really meant was that I was easy to ignore and Joseph was too exhausting to manage. The Jeep was my breaking point. I was driving a 1998 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles and no air conditioning. I'd saved $3,000 for a used car that wouldn't break down. My father told me to keep driving the Honda until it dies. 2 weeks later, Joseph came home in a bright red Jeep Wrangler, lifted suspension, premium sound system, the works. My mom was nearly in tears, saying how proud she was to give him reliable transportation. When I asked how they could afford a $35,000 vehicle after telling me to stick with my old one, she said, "Your Honda still runs, doesn't it?" That's when I accepted that I'd never be their priority. Not at 12, not at 16, not even when I graduated with honors. After college, I got a job at a small software firm in Austin called TechFlow Solutions. The pay was modest, $52,000 a year, but I was good at it. Within 6 months, I was solving problems that had stumped senior developers. 2 years later, I was leading projects. 4 years in, I was managing a team of 12 and earning $85,000 a year. I became obsessed with learning how businesses worked, staying late to listen to sales calls, reading TechCrunch, Wired, and Harvard Business Review, attending meetups, and networking with founders. I didn't just want to build software. I wanted to build software companies. Meanwhile, Joseph dropped out after 3 years and 6 different majors: business, communications, marketing, sports management, psychology, and finally, general studies, before giving up entirely. He moved back home and started cycling through new big ideas: luxury car rentals, crypto mining, social media influencing, day trading, real estate flipping. Then back to car rentals, but this time with a chauffeur twist. Each new plan came with PowerPoint slides, printouts from Entrepreneur magazine, and grand promises. Every time, my parents listened like he was pitching the next Amazon. When he got into crypto, my dad helped him build a mining rig. When he tried day trading, my mom opened a joint investment account. When he wanted to flip houses, they drove around scouting properties with him. None of it went anywhere. The mining rig made nothing. The trading lost $8,000. The real estate idea died in the research stage. But every failure was reframed as a learning experience, while my achievements were treated as expected. By 28, I'd saved $35,000 and spotted a market gap I could fill. At TechFlow, I noticed construction companies were constantly frustrated with their project management tools. Their work was complex. Subcontractors, shifting timelines, weather delays, inspections, budgets that changed daily. Most software either lacked construction-specific features or was so complicated it required dedicated IT staff. So, on nights and weekends, I started building something better. A simple yet powerful project management platform designed for mid-sized construction companies. Too big for basic tools, too small for enterprise systems. I tested it with real contractors. The response was overwhelmingly positive. One told me, "We need something that tracks our jobs, people, and materials without needing a tech guy." I built a working prototype that did exactly that. It was intuitive for field workers, but powerful enough for complex projects. When I showed it to 15 construction firms, 12 said they'd pay for it. I had letters of intent worth $180,000 in potential first-year revenue. I needed $65,000 total to launch: development, legal setup, marketing, and basic operating costs. I already had more than half saved, so I needed about $30,000 more. Banks wouldn't lend without collateral, and I didn't want to give up equity to investors. The logical choice was to ask my family. I spent 3 weeks preparing, professionally printing my business plan, creating slides, checking my numbers with my uncle in finance. I wanted to show this was a real opportunity, not a dream. I scheduled dinner at my parents' house one Sunday in March. Joseph was there, lounging on the couch playing video games, while I helped Mom set the table. I brought wine and flowers, hoping to set a positive tone. During dinner, I began my presentation. I explained the market opportunity, demonstrated my prototype, and shared letters of intent. "I've been working on this for a year," I said. "There's a clear need in the construction industry for specialized project management software. I've already saved most of what I need, just about $30,000 more to get started." My father leaned back in his chair, silent for a moment. "Finn, that's a lot of money," he said finally. "Startups are risky. Maybe you should keep saving or find investors. It's too risky for us." "I'm not asking for a handout," I said. "You'd get equity and a fair return. I've already got clients lined up." He shook his head. "We just can't justify it right now." And that was it. Joseph quickly changed the subject to a new business idea about importing luxury watches. My parents leaned in, eager to hear more. I quietly packed up my laptop and left that night with a heavy heart. Over the next 2 years, I kept working, saving, and building. I finally launched the company using $58,000 of my own savings and a small personal loan. The first year was hard. Long nights, constant stress, and no guarantees. But within 18 months, the business was profitable. Clients loved the software. Within 3 years, we had over 200 customers and $2.4 million in annual revenue. For the first time, I felt genuine pride. I'd built something from the ground up, without help, without approval, and without family money. Meanwhile, Joseph's ventures followed their usual pattern. The car rental business failed. Then came crypto, influencer work, and a short-lived podcast about success mindset. My parents kept funding his failures, even co-signing a $625,000 loan for his luxury import business. It collapsed within 6 months. The dealership sued. The bank came after my parents. That's when I got the call. "Finn, can we come over?" my mother asked. Her voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. When they arrived, they looked defeated. My father said quietly, "We need your help. The bank's after us. We might lose the house. If you can sell your place and lend us some of the money, we could pay off the debt." I stared at them. "You want me to sell my home to fix a problem you created for Joseph?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Finn, you're doing so well. You can rebuild." I stood up and opened the door. "Get off my property," I said. They left without another word. That was 2 years ago. They sold their house and moved into a smaller place. Joseph still lives with them, chasing his next big idea. As for me, my company recently crossed $10 million in annual revenue, and I'm negotiating a national partnership. I've built a life I'm proud of, stable, secure, and completely my own. I used to think success meant earning my family's approval. Now I know it means building something no one can take from you. The existing tools on the market were either too generic or overly complicated. I had built a prototype that filled that gap, and I'd already validated the concept with potential customers. My father barely glanced at the documents I'd laid out in front of him. He continued cutting his steak with mechanical precision, clearly disinterested. "Finn, you already have a good job," he said without looking up. "You're making decent money, you've got benefits, and you're building a solid career. Why risk all that for a pipe dream?" "This isn't a pipe dream, Dad," I replied. "I've done my research and validated the idea. Construction companies are desperate for better project management tools. What's available right now is either too complicated or too broad. My solution targets a specific need in a growing market." I opened my laptop to show them the demo. The interface was simple and clean. You could view project timelines, track subcontractor schedules, monitor material deliveries, and generate reports in just a few clicks. "Look," I said, clicking through the features. "A project manager can instantly see the progress of every job, spot delays before they happen, and communicate directly with subcontractors. This could save companies thousands of dollars in lost time and miscommunication." Joseph looked up from his phone just long enough to glance at my laptop. "Looks complicated," he muttered, then went right back to scrolling through Instagram. My mother's next comment still stings to this day. "Honey, we think it's wonderful that you're ambitious, but starting a business is very risky. Most fail, and you don't have much business experience." "That's exactly why I need capital to do this right," I said. "I'm not asking for a handout. I need $30,000 to close the gap between what I've saved and what's needed to launch. It's not a gift, it's an investment. I'll repay you with interest, or you can take equity." I showed them my financial projections. Break even within 18 months, profitability by year 2, and conservative estimates of $500,000 in revenue by year 3. My father set down his fork and gave me the same look I'd seen my whole life, the one that meant I was being unreasonable. "Finn, we're not venture capitalists. We're accountants. We deal in certainty, not possibility. Starting a tech company is basically gambling, and we don't gamble with our retirement fund." "But this isn't gambling," I insisted. "I already have letters of intent from 12 construction companies, worth around $180,000 in potential first-year revenue. I have a working prototype. I've spent 6 years in the industry and understand both the technical and business sides." "Letters of intent aren't contracts," my father replied flatly. Potential revenue isn't real revenue. What happens if those companies back out? What if a competitor launches something similar? What if you can't scale? Every question he asked was reasonable from a risk perspective, but they were all solvable problems, not deal breakers. Every business involves risk, I said, but this is a calculated one. I've spent over a year researching the opportunity, interviewing dozens of potential clients, analyzing competitors, and testing the product. This isn't some random idea I thought up last week. Joseph, who had been glued to his phone, finally looked up. Maybe you should just stick with what you're good at, Finn. Not everyone's built to be an entrepreneur. The dismissiveness in his tone hit hard. My younger brother, who had never finished a single project, was telling me to stay in my lane, and my parents silently agreed. Think about it logically, my father continued. You're asking us to risk a lot of money on something that might not succeed. Even if it does, there's no guarantee it'll last. The tech world is brutal. Companies fail all the time, even good ones. Every business has risk, I replied, struggling to stay calm. But this one has proof of demand and a validated market. Finn, my mother said in that familiar, condescending tone, we only want what's best for you, and what's best is stability. You have a good job, benefits, and security. Don't throw that away chasing a fantasy. The word fantasy felt like a punch. I'd spent a year building something real, something that solved real problems, and my own mother was calling it imaginary. This isn't a fantasy, Mom. It's the real business opportunity with real customers ready to buy. You have potential customers, my father corrected. That's not the same thing. The discussion went on another 20 minutes, but I knew the outcome from the start. Their minds were already made up. They weren't evaluating the idea. They were rejecting it based on their own fears about risk and uncertainty. My father's final words sealed it. We can't support this venture, Finn. It's too risky. We have to think about our own financial security. We can't afford to lose $30,000 on something that might not work out. I drove home that night feeling gutted, not just because they'd said no, but because of how they said it. They treated me like a naive dreamer instead of an adult who had done his homework. But rejection can be powerful fuel. The next morning, I woke up more determined than ever. If my family wouldn't believe in me, I'd prove them wrong another way. I spent 3 months exploring other funding options. Business lines of credit, SBA loans, even crowdfunding, which was still fairly new in 2019. Eventually, the best route was a business credit line. It took months of paperwork, financial statements, and meetings with lenders, but I was finally approved for $35,000 at 8.5% interest. Combined with my savings, I had enough to move forward. I gave my employer 6 weeks' notice and spent every evening and weekend preparing for the transition. I incorporated the company, set up accounting systems, leased a small office, and hired my first employee, a front-end developer I'd worked with before, who believed in the project. By September, I was working full-time on my startup, Construct Flow, with the tagline, Project Management Built for Construction. The first year was brutal. 18-hour days, instant noodles for dinner, and constant stress. Some nights, I lay awake wondering if my parents had been right, if I'd made a terrible mistake leaving stability behind. But slowly, progress came. My first client signed on in November, a residential builder in Dallas I'd interviewed during research. The second arrived in January, a commercial contractor in Houston who heard about us through word of mouth. By the end of year 1, We had 8 paying clients and $140,000 in annual recurring revenue. Meanwhile, Joseph had a new idea, a luxury car rental company for high-end clients renting Ferraris and Lamborghinis for weddings and corporate events. He'd seen a similar business in Miami and decided it would work locally. He had done no market research, had no automotive experience, no understanding of insurance or liability, and his business plan was just a PowerPoint filled with pictures of cars copied from manufacturer websites. But he had something I didn't: our parents' full support. I wasn't supposed to overhear the conversation that revealed it. At a family barbecue 9 months after my pitch, I walked past the dining room and heard my father say, "We've looked at the numbers, and we think we can make it work." "How much are we talking?" my uncle asked. "About $625,000 total," my dad replied. "We'll take a loan against the house and the business, but we can pay it off within 5 years once revenue starts coming in." I froze. $625,000 for Joseph's luxury car rental dream. The same parents who told me $30,000 was too risky were ready to gamble over $500,000 on my brother's fantasy. "That's a lot of money," my uncle said carefully. "It is," my father agreed, "but this is Joseph. He's got vision, drive, and connections in the luxury market. Plus, there's growing demand for high-end rentals here." I wanted to walk in and ask exactly what connections Joseph had, or what research he'd supposedly done. Joseph joined in. "We're talking Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens, Porsches, stuff people want to drive but can't own. Rentals range from $500 to $1,500 a day." "And the insurance?" my uncle asked. "All covered," Joseph said confidently. "Even with full coverage, the margins are great." I doubted he'd researched insurance at all. Specialty coverage for exotic rentals is notoriously difficult and costly. Still, my parents were convinced. "We're so proud of him," my mother said. "He's really thought this through." I slipped quietly out the back door and sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to process it. My parents, who called my proven business too risky, were risking everything on Joseph's fantasy. 2 weeks later, he was driving a new BMW M5, supposedly for market research. Then came a Porsche 911, a Lamborghini Huracan, and a Ferrari 488, cars worth hundreds of thousands combined. The business itself never launched. Joseph spent his time driving around, posting photos at luxury spots, and talking about his upcoming launch. He blew tens of thousands on a website that never went live, and business trips that were really vacations. Meanwhile, my company was thriving. By year 2, we had 37 clients and $580,000 in annual recurring revenue. I'd hired 4 employees and moved into a larger office. By year 3, we were nearing $1 million in revenue and attracting acquisition offers. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents were sinking money into Joseph's illusion, I was building exactly the kind of success they said was impossible. Still, it came at a price. The stress of running a growing company while watching my family's finances crumble took a toll. I'd gained weight, lost sleep, and constantly felt the strain. When I finished my explanation that night, I showed my family the full financial plan and detailed cost projections. "I've already saved $35,000, I said. "I just need $30,000 more to launch properly." My father leaned back in his chair, silent. My mother nodded politely, but avoided eye contact. Joseph finally looked up from his phone for a moment. After a long pause, my dad said, "Finn, that's a big ask. Startups are risky. Most don't survive the first year. Maybe you should keep saving or find external investors instead of putting family money on the line. I expected caution, but not complete rejection. I'm not asking for a handout, I said calmly. You'd get equity and a clear return if the company performs as projected. I already validated the market. He sighed. Son, we just can't justify that kind of investment right now. I nodded, though disappointment settled heavily in my chest. Joseph then took over the conversation, talking excitedly about his next idea, importing luxury watches. My parents listened intently, smiling and nodding, while I quietly packed my laptop. That night, I drove home in silence. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt focused. Over the next 2 years, I kept building, slowly but consistently. I launched the company with $58,000 of my own savings and a small personal loan. The early days were intense. Late nights, constant pressure, and no certainty of success. But within 18 months, my platform became profitable. Word spread quickly in the construction industry. Clients appreciated how easy it was to use and how it actually addressed their day-to-day pain points. By the third year, the company had grown to over 200 clients and $2.4 million in annual revenue. We expanded into 2 cities and partnered with several large construction firms. For the first time, I felt genuine pride. I had built something real, from the ground up, without shortcuts and without family support. Meanwhile, Joseph's ventures continued in the same pattern. His luxury car rental idea never launched. He then jumped into cryptocurrency, followed by an influencer phase, and later a success mindset podcast that lasted 3 months. Each time, my parents funded him, covering debts, paying rent, and even co-signing a $625,000 loan for his so-called luxury import business. That loan became their breaking point. Within 6 months, the business collapsed. The dealership Joseph partnered with sued him, and the bank came after my parents for repayment. They were drowning in debt, their home at risk, and their savings gone. Then came the call. Finn, my mother's voice trembled. Can we come over? When they arrived, I hardly recognized them. They looked worn down, defeated. My father's tone was quiet, something I'd never heard before. We need your help, he said. The bank's on us. We might lose the house. He hesitated, then added, if you could sell your place and lend us part of the money, we could pay off the most urgent debt. I just stared at them. You want me to sell my home to fix a situation caused by Joseph's decisions? My mother's eyes filled with tears. Please, Finn, we're out of options. You're doing so well, you could rebuild easily. For a long moment, I said nothing. All the memories of that dinner table years ago came flooding back, being dismissed, mocked, and told my business was a fantasy. I finally stood up and walked to the door. You both made your choices, I said quietly. Now you need to live with them. My father tried to speak, but I opened the door and gestured toward it. Get off my property. They stood there for a second, stunned, before walking out. That was 2 years ago. They eventually sold their house and moved into a smaller place. Joseph still lives with them, chasing his next big opportunity. As for me, ConstructFlow recently passed $10 million in annual revenue, and we're finalizing a national partnership with one of the largest construction firms in the country. I've built a company that's stable, respected, and entirely my own. Looking back, I've realized something important. Success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about creating something real, something that no one can take from you. I'd started skipping family gatherings because I couldn't stand listening to Joseph brag about his latest business ideas while my parents nodded approvingly. The first real sign that my parents were in financial trouble came during a call with my mother in November of my third year running the company. "Finn, honey, I hope you're doing well with your little software company," she said in that overly sweet tone she only used when she wanted something. "It's going really well, Mom. We're actually on track to hit $1 million in revenue this year." "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. Listen, your father and I were wondering if you might be able to help us with something. We're having some cash flow issues at the firm and could really use a loan to get through the next few months." I almost laughed. After everything they'd put me through, turning down my request for help, then burning through over $500,000 on Joseph's failed ideas, they had the nerve to ask me for money. "How much are we talking about, Mom?" "Well, we'd need about $50,000 to cover some immediate expenses, just until we're back on our feet." "And Joseph, is he helping at all?" There was a pause. "Joseph's dealing with some challenges right now. The car rental business didn't work out, and he's looking for new opportunities." "What kind of challenges?" Another pause. "He's had some legal issues. Some cars were repossessed, and there are disputes with creditors. It's complicated." Of course it was complicated. Everything with Joseph always was. I could guess he'd been paying for luxury cars, using credit cards and personal loans, probably misleading lenders about his income and business prospects. "Mom, I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't just hand you $50,000. That's a lot of money. And considering what happened when I asked for help 3 years ago, I think you understand why I'm hesitant." "Finn, this is completely different," she said sharply, the tone I remembered from childhood arguments. "We're not asking you to invest in some risky venture. We're asking our son for help during a tough time." "You mean the same son whose risky venture you refuse to support? The one now generating 7 figures? That's not fair, Finn. We did what we thought was best." "No, Mom. You did what was convenient. You supported Joseph's dreams and dismissed mine. And now you want me to clean up the mess that caused." The call ended with her in tears and me feeling like the bad guy for not immediately offering a check. But over the past 3 years, I'd learned something valuable. Financial boundaries are just as important as emotional ones. Over the next 6 months, the calls became more frequent and more desperate. My parents were facing foreclosure. Their accounting firm was losing clients as rumors about their finances spread. Joseph had vanished, apparently living with a girlfriend in Colorado while avoiding legal trouble from his failed businesses. Through my uncle, I learned it was even worse than I thought. Joseph hadn't just bought luxury cars with loans against my parents' assets. He'd opened credit cards in the business name, borrowed against the cars, and convinced my parents to co-sign additional loans for business expansion. The total debt was nearing $800,000, all secured against their personal property. The cars were repossessed, leaving them buried in debt and with nothing to show for it. Joseph had fled the state, leaving my parents to face the creditors and potential lawsuits alone. Then came the final call, on a Tuesday evening in May. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. It was my dad, and he sounded exhausted. "Finn, I need to be honest with you. We're going to lose everything. The house, the business, our retirement, all of it." "I'm sorry to hear that, Dad. But let me finish," he interrupted. "I know we haven't always supported your business, and I know you're angry about Joseph. But we're desperate. We lost everything betting on him, and now we need your help. He continued, our financial advisor says the only way to save the house is to come up with $180,000 to pay down the debt and restructure the loans. We know it's a lot, but with your business doing so well, you want me to give you $180,000? Not give, he said quickly. Loan. We'd pay you back once we're stable again. Dad, how would you pay me back? You just said you're losing the business and the house. Well, that's what we wanted to talk about. The advisor thinks if you sold your house and moved back home temporarily, we could use that money to save everything. I had to set the phone down. They wanted me to sell my home, the one I'd worked for, used as collateral to launch the company they refused to support, so they could fix the mess they made investing in Joseph's fantasy. Let me get this straight, I said. You want me to sell my house, uproot my life, and move back home so you can cover the debt from Joseph's failed venture? Please don't make this about Joseph, Dad said. This is about family, about helping your parents when we need it most. No, Dad, this is about Joseph. This situation exists because you gambled our family's future on his delusions, while calling my real business plan too risky. We made mistakes, he admitted. But we can't change the past. We can only ask for help now. You're right, you can't change the past. When I needed help, you said no. You called my plan unrealistic. Then you gave Joseph $625,000 with no plan at all. And now you want me to undo that choice. Finn, I'm not finished. I built this business from the ground up, I interrupted. I worked 18-hour days for years while you all wrote me off. And now that I've succeeded, you want me to sacrifice everything I've earned to fix your mistake? No. There was silence. The answer is no, Dad. I'm not giving you $180,000. I'm not selling my home. You made your choice, and now you live with it. Finn, we're your parents. We raised you. We love you. You loved Joseph, I said. You raised Joseph. You invested in Joseph. I raised myself and built this on my own, and I'm keeping it. I hung up and sat quietly, staring out at the yard I'd landscaped myself, thinking about how far I'd come. 3 weeks later, they showed up unannounced. I saw their car, a worn Honda Civic my mother had been driving since she sold her newer one to fund Joseph's business. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. What are you doing here? We were hoping to talk face to face, Dad said. I think we've said everything that needs to be said. Please, Finn, Mom pleaded. We drove 3 hours, just a few minutes. Against my better judgment, I gestured to the porch chairs. We sat in silence for a moment as the sound of neighborhood kids playing drifted through the air. A reminder of how normal life could feel, even in moments like this. Finally, Dad spoke. The foreclosure is final. We have 30 days to move out. I'm sorry to hear that. The business is gone too. We had to sell it for almost nothing. Your mother and I are filing for bankruptcy. Where's Joseph in all this? They exchanged a look. Mom finally said, Joseph's in rehab. The stress and the legal trouble led to some addiction issues. So that was it. The golden child, the one they'd risked everything on, was in rehab while they'd lost their home and business. We know we made mistakes, Dad said quietly. We should have supported you when you asked. We put too much faith in Joseph. Mom added, we're not asking you to fix everything, just a little help to get back on our feet, maybe enough for a deposit on an apartment. I looked at them, the same people who had raised me, but who had also dismissed me, ignored my ideas, and invested their future in Joseph's failures. Mom, Dad, I said, when I came to you 3 years ago with a plan, you didn't just say no. You made me feel stupid for even asking. You told me to be grateful for my job and stop chasing fantasies. They both stared down at their hands. Then, less than a year later, you took out a $625,000 loan to fund Joseph's luxury car dream, with no plan, no research, no experience, just because he said it would work. We know we made the wrong choice, Dad said softly. Do you? I asked, standing up. Because even now, you haven't apologized for rejecting my business. You're sorry you backed the wrong son, but not sorry you dismissed me. That's not true, Mom began. It is true, I said. You're here because you need money, not because you've realized how you treated me. If Joseph's business had succeeded, you wouldn't be here. They said nothing. The truth is, I was always the backup plan, the responsible one who'd clean up the mess. Well, not anymore. I turned toward the door. I've worked 16-hour days for years to build what you said was impossible. I proved you wrong. I'm not undoing that. Please, Finn, Mom cried. We'll pay you back however long it takes. With what? You have no home, no business, no income. How will you pay me back? We'll find a way, Dad said weakly. We'll get jobs. Dad, you're 62. Mom's 59. You've never worked outside your firm. What jobs will let you pay off that kind of debt and still survive? Silence hung between us. The answer is no, I said firmly. I'm not giving you money. I'm not co-signing loans. And you're not moving in. You made your choice when you backed Joseph. Now you live with it. How can you be so heartless? Mom sobbed. We're your parents. And I'm your son, the one you ignored and belittled. The one you still can't acknowledge, even now. I opened the door. You should go. Dad stood, shoulders slumped. If you change your mind, I won't. I watched them walk to their car, and for a moment, I almost called out. But then I remembered sitting in that dining room 3 years earlier, presenting my plan and being told it was too risky. I remembered working endless hours, surviving on ramen while they bankrolled Joseph's fantasies. I remembered being invisible while his failures were celebrated, and I closed the door. That was 6 months ago. I haven't heard from them since.